record, my name is Jackie Folsom. Today, I am here as the lobbyist for the Vermont Fairs and Field Days Association. The reason I'm able to do that is because I'm only a sergeant at arms on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So the agreement was I can be a civilian and do what I want on Wednesdays and Fridays. So that's why I'm here to speak with you. And thank you very much. This is a new committee for the most part for me to come into. The Fairs and Field Days Association is actually the umbrella group for all the fairs and field days represented in Vermont. We have 12 fairs that we work with, and they receive the stipend, which is being discussed in the housekeeping bill that you received from the Agency of Agriculture. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about how we feel about that as an organization. I'd like you to know that when the fairs receive the stipend, the association, which is made up of members of each of the fairs, actually get together and they vote that a certain percentage of their stipend, and this year I believe it's 2%, goes back to the association. And that's how we have, they pay their dues based off of their stipend. And we use that for professional development. We use it for paying the lobbyist. We have actually 4 meetings a year. Where we all get together. Sadly, most of them have been on Zoom, and we hate it because everybody likes to get together and talk about their fairs. And I'm happy to say that we're working with the chair and with Allura. So next Wednesday, we will have about a dozen people from about 6 different fairs coming in to visit in about 9 committees in the State House. And we're hoping one of them will be yours. There'll be people here from Addison, Caledonia, Tunbridge, Champlain Valley, Rutland, and who am I missing? Orleans, yes. Mr. Jason Segar will be here. So we will connect the fairs with the peoples in the committee, so you'll be able to meet them and talk with them. And what they'll be doing is bringing in information about their capital grants. So we receive 2 pots of money from the state. We receive the stipend, which is currently at $200,000, and that's what I'm talking about today. And we also receive $300,000 in capital grants, and that comes through the institutions committees. And that money is used for capital grant improvements, which must last 20 years or longer. So it's things like bathroom updates, burying water and electric lines underground for safety purposes. We've had a couple fairs put up new buildings. So it's that sort of thing. And we work very closely with Representative Emmons and in the past, Senator Benning. So this year it'll be Senator Ingalls and his committee to talk about that. The stipends, we literally call them the money to turn on the lights. They are listed in the housekeeping language as premium money. And that's if any people go to fairs in this committee, do people? Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. Oh, we got to get a couple of you going. So the fairs have a lot of competitions, as you noticed in here. The reason that this stipend information is back in here is because I think Steve Collier from the agency said somehow it was repealed several years ago. And even though Representative Lawrence was president of Caledonia County Fair for years and sat on this committee, and I have been involved in working with the legislature for at least 20 years, it got biased. Nobody knew that had happened. So please vote yes and put it back in because that 200,000 is very, very important. It's based on a formula, so the fairs have to come in and they apply for grants for both the stipend and the capital grant. The stipend this year is at $200,000. So that's a lot of money for 12 fairs, and the amount ranges from $20,000 to about $9,000 that they get for the smaller fairs. The capital grants is at $300,000. That was increased a couple years ago by the governor, and we really appreciate that. And this year, it was divided evenly between the 9 fairs, and they each got $30,000. We have a couple anomalies. So I will speak to the bill. We are supportive of this, absolutely supportive. Please put it back. Please vote yes. Please vote for our $200,000. That is a line item in the Agency of Ag's budget. So when it comes through, there are 4 items, including Farm to School, I think is one, and I think the 2+2 program is another. But the fair stipend is a single line item in the Agency of Ag's budget, and you'll see it at $200,000. So I'm hoping that you support that too. We are in support of the language that Mr. Collier wrote, and we hope that you would support it too. I do have a couple things that I would like to say about it, though. I'm sure some of you are aware that the farm show has not been held for 4 years. This committee and the Senate Ag Committee used to go in because we had a dairy banquet and dairy awards on Thursday of the farm show, and the House and Senate Ag Committees were invited as guests to come in and participate in that. The farm show has not been held since before COVID, and actually I was the last manager of the farm show. And so they're trying to hold one next year. There is an RFP out for a new manager. I don't know how that's going. I am not reapplying. But the challenge with this language and the farm show is this says in particular that if you have not applied, if you do not have a show, if an organization does not have a fair, you cannot apply for the stipend until you have had one, because the formula is based on premiums, attendance, and so on. So I've had discussions with the farm show board members, and I had discussion with Steve Collier yesterday. What I would like to suggest, and maybe when he comes in again, you might be able to suggest it, is that there would be a line item that would say, we support having the farm show receive the last stipend that they may have gotten. It might be $3,000 or $4,000. It's not a lot of money out of that $200,000, because they're going to need it to open the show next year. They do have premiums. What I understand is they're going to try to have it again at Champlain Valley Exposition. Might be a little smaller than it has been in the past, but the association is really supportive of trying to give them a little jumpstart money for 20. And sadly, they'll apply for it in December of this year. They won't get it until after the show is over in January, but it will help them if they know that they're going to receive it. So I would just like to say that if there's a way that you could have a discussion about putting in some language that would say they should one time receive what they received the last time they received a stipend, and the agency will be able to tell you what that amount is. Be very grateful for their help. And I do know that, so are there any other questions? I know Representative O'Brien is ready to ask me something. He's been primed.
So just to clarify, the farm show has historically been one of the events that receives part of the $200,000 stipend.
Yes, the farm show is only eligible for a stipend because they do not own property, so they can't receive a capital grant. So they have always received a stipend up until they stopped having. And actually, we were able to secure money for all the fairs through COVID. So they received stipends through COVID to help them through when they had no income, which was very necessary and very wonderful for all of them. And then this year they were not eligible because they did not have an event last year.
The farm show was held sometime in
January, last weekend in January, or first weekend in February.
2019 was the last time, or
19, yes, that's right, yeah.
Representative Temple.
So just a quick summary here. There are two funds, the $200,000 one and the capital fund, which is $300,000.
Correct.
Those are both assured. There's nothing we need to do there, but it's really this capital fund allocation for the farm show that we need to be sure gets on there.
So the stipend is in the agency's budget, which I'm not sure if you've gone through yet, but okay, so when they come over, you will see that line item, and please support that. So that will be voted on by the entire legislature. Right. That's in their budget. The grant is in the capital bill, and we're hoping and guessing that will go through. Now, the issue is when they do the capital funding, they will work on that, and it's a 2-year proposal. So this is the end of the second year. So the capital grants will be reinstituted for the next 2 years, and we're hoping it stays at $300,000. So if we hear something, I will let you all know so that you can help us lobby on our behalf. But
Great.
Those are the two funds of money, and they're come from separate places.
So what you're looking for us to help with is agreeing to the $200,000. Our committee will hear from the agency officially, and then we'll take a position on that. Agreeing to the language in the housekeeping bill overall, and then maybe adding in language that would allow an exception to be made for the stipend for this year to apply to the farm show.
One-time
One-time
proposal that they received.
pandemic related.
The last
exception.
stipend amount would be very helpful to them, I think, yes. And so there is another clause in here. It refers to, and I think Mr. Collier mentioned it, referred to the Guilford Fair because they are a fair that doesn't qualify technically under this because they only hold a 2-day fair. And they have been grandfathered under the current, under the previous stipend language, and they are also grandfathered under this. Actually, the only fair I have never visited. I've gotten to all of them, so that's been kind of fun over my career. But Guilford is Labor Day way down on the Massachusetts border, and it's just, I have never gotten down to that. Maybe this year.
Representative O'Brien?
Yeah, a couple things, Jackie. One, the Big E gets a share of the capital grant.
The Big E does not get a share of our part of the capital grants. The 300,000 is stipulated just for the Vermont fairs. The Eastern States, there is a pot of money that does go to Eastern States, but it's in another section. It is not our $300,000, and that goes for the upkeep of the Vermont building down there.
The other thing I wonder if you would think would be a good idea is to change the, if the agency has certain rules for what makes it fair, like 3 days and premiums, et cetera, is there a way just to say, let's keep those rules, but then let the, say, secretary have the discretion to use the stipend on all these other, cases that like farm show or the Guilford Fair that might not meet, just because I can see going forward, if there's some, great day and a half fair
That needs to have, yeah.
and maybe they could get something too.
We actually, we have associate members in the organization, and so one of them is the Dairy Festival, and they are eligible to apply for stipends, not for the grants, but they haven't for the last couple years. I think they're very well funded with the Lions Club up in St. Albans, or Enosburg, excuse me. There is a line in the draft that says, in the secretary's sole discretion, the secretary may consider the additional enumerated factors in this section and use an alternate method to equitably distribute available funds. So if somebody happened to pop up with a fair, which it would be unlikely given how expensive they are to run and how many volunteers they require and that sort of thing, the secretary would be able to find another formula than the one they currently use and try to do that. In all honesty, over the years that I've been doing this, we've lost 2 fairs. Washington County Fair, which was here for a long, long time, but it didn't own property. So it bounced from Scribner's Farm over on Route 2 to, we were over on the other end of Route 2 in East Montpelier for a while. That finally folded. We also lost Windsor Fair, about 15 years ago. That was in a field, on a farmer's field. They did not own property. So the 2 fairs that are currently running that do not own their own property is Deerfield down in Wilmington. They actually use it on the school property down there. And quite honestly, we're worried about them. They're having a severe issue with things on their fair. And also Franklin County Field Days doesn't own their property, and they're in a bit of a pickle right now, which I would be glad to discuss if you'd wish me to.
Talk to you later about that. I'll talk to you later about that.
Okay.
Representative Rice?
Yeah, sort of along a similar line of thought to what Representative O'Brien was getting at is I'm wondering if it would be helpful if the language that carves out the exemption for the one fair that is returning this year that would otherwise not qualify, if that was sort of more, if it were to be more generic to say that sort of in the event that a fair that has qualified before for some reason is unable to hold it in a year, you don't hold that against them and sort of immediately disqualify them.
That's a
Fairs that
great,
have qualified can qualify based on their last numbers or something.
that's a great idea. Thank you very much. We'd support that, sure. We're hoping that doesn't happen with any of them, but you never know.
Questions?
Detail, Jackie. You said if the stipend, the one-time stipend for the dairy show at the Champlain Valley, which happens at the end of
The farm show.
farm show in January, the money wouldn't be voted on until December of 2023, but wouldn't be available until after the farm show. Would that language be retroactive, that money could be for any activity during 2024? So you wouldn't have to wait a full year for.
Well, it's already, so the grant application is due on December 15th after all the fairs close. And then there is a grant committee that is comprised of, I believe you're on it, aren't you, Representative Orion? Yeah. Senator Maas is on it. We have two members of the fairs represented, the Agency of Ag, I think the Agency of Natural Resources. There's about 7 people that are on the committee, and we meet in January. So it takes time to get this. It's about a 15-page form, and they have to do a profit and loss statement. They have to do a little bit of narrative. So the fairs turn those in by December 15th, and then the committee meets in January. So that's the challenge. And then I think the contracts have just been sent out maybe last week. So the farm show would have already happened by the time. I don't think there's a way that we could get them to it earlier. But I think just knowing if they were able to know that they were eligible for that little pot of money, it would help them plan a little bit.
The fairs charge admission, so they have a revenue source through admission and maybe a percentage of whatever the vendors sell. I don't know how that works. Do they do any other, is there fundraising that also happens?
So the farm show is the only one that does not charge, although I think that's changing next year from what I understand. That was always free all those years. They all do charge. Some of them charge a flat fee so that if you go in, your rides and your admission are covered. Some of them sell tickets separately, such as Champlain Valley. A lot of them do other events throughout the year, and you ask them about that when they come in. We always want to know how many extra events they do. So, for example, Vermont State Fair down in Rutland, they have a rodeo, they have a 4th of July event, they have antique shows, they have flea markets. A lot of them use the money, the grant money, to build buildings, and then they store boats and RVs and cars during the winter. A lot of them are venues for weddings. Sorry, Representative O'Brien, a little bit of competition there. Tunbridge actually was doing funerals, I believe, during COVID. I mean, they all try to do something different because it is a lot of great open land that they have available. And it's only been in about the past 10, 15 years that we've really urged them to try to come up with something else to do on that property. Champlain Valley Expo, for example, there's something going on every weekend up there. So they do try to do a lot of extra things. And several of them were also during COVID, they were drop off and pick up points for food distribution.
Yep.
And CVE also had an emergency hospital located up there. Thankfully, it was never had to be used, but they do a lot of different things and try to be very useful to their community. And you can ask them all these questions when they come in next week.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of 2 issues that are possibly of interest to this committee. Current use, something we've talked about. So are the fairs that own property, do they get a current use exemption? Is it considered agricultural land?
I don't believe so, but adding to that, I will just say one of the things that we have discovered is that there's 4 of them that have come under the 3-acre rule with impervious surfaces, and they are paying a lot of money right now for the pleasure of having a yearly permit. There are 4 fairs, so it's Champlain Valley, it's Rutland, it's Addison, and it's Orleans. So those 4 fairs are paying anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000 a year for the privilege of being a 3-acre site. And the reason they got caught is because impervious surfaces include the building roofs. And if you think about the fairs, they all have a lot of buildings. It also includes gravel driveways and sidewalks, anything that's paved. So those 4 fairs are in a particular bind. And we were unable to get an exemption when that went through. We're not done asking, but it seems like an uphill battle. So they are having a serious problem because I believe Tim Shea from CVE will tell you to put in the wastewater system that they're requiring is upwards of $2 million, which they will not be able to raise. And your other question, sir, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just sort of related, whether for Act 250 purposes, the land is considered ag land and whether the buildings need to be, go through an Act 250 process.
I believe Addison probably could answer that question. I think when Representative Norris was here last year, Representative Pearl and Representative O'Brien and Representative Supernaut might remember those discussions with their septic system. And they did have to go through an Act 250 permit. And in the end, I believe that they couldn't get out of it. I believe they did have to do it. But I think A&R worked very well with them just because there was such an outcry of how it was quite unfair. Because the system was only going to be used 5 days a year and they had to put it in as if it was being used year round. So we do get caught in some of those circumstances.
Any other questions? Representative Lipsky?
And Chairman Durfee, if this is not germane, please cut my question off. But having Jackie here with her historical knowledge, I approached Chairman Durfee, maybe it was yesterday, that I got a constituent request for farmers market advice. We have a farmers market in Stowe that does not own land and has been moved around and been put on notice that their current tenant wants to sell their property and it's too much interfering. Did I have any advice or source of grants or whatever? And, with Representative Graham and Representative Supernaut's bill, it's all relevant. Stowe may be a little more product or prepared food than pure produce like many of the farmers markets. But it's very important to the community, visitors. It's a big draw. Do you have any advice, unless I'm eating up important time, on what, then these are not-for-profit type organizations. If anyone wants.
So farmers markets rather than fairs, but it may be sort of in a similar situation to the fairs that don't own property and are kind of, at the whim of the property owner and still use the space. So the parallel anyway.
So you can cut me off or brains.
So the fairs that we find out that are having the most problems are the ones that do not own the property because they do not, there's infrastructure that they require. There's buildings that they need to put up, particularly because since COVID, if you try to rent a tent, it's astronomical if you can find them. And so Addison County is one fair that's putting up a brand new building this year because their ability to rent tents has been a huge problem for them. So that's Lamoille County, right? Yeah. And the problem with that is, so Lamoille County Field Days own their property, but it's way up in Johnson out of the way. And to have a farmer's market up there it wouldn't be a good plan. And I think except probably for Rutland, that's probably the only fair that would be centrally located that might want to come into a partnership with the farmer's market and offer them space. All the rest of them are, way out where there was farmland where they could purchase, and it isn't really in a spot where they might be able to help that happen. Yeah. It would be a good synergy. And I do have to say, one of the things we've been really pushing our fairs to do is to promote local products. I think everywhere you go, you'll find a sugar house that's probably been built by their local Sugar Makers Association. And we try to get to have them work with their local farmers to get some local foods in there. But yeah, that's a tough one. When you don't own your land, as we're finding out, particularly in Franklin County, they're having a problem right now with that whole situation. I'll be glad to chat with you. Thank you for the question, though. I wish there was some way we could have the great open land that the fairs own work with the farmer's market, but they're just so far away normally that it wouldn't be a good fit.
Representative O'Brien.
Becky, is there any money, you know, at the agency or maybe in commerce that supports the sort of agritourism that goes on at these fairs and field days sites, but is maybe a one-day festival, like Tunbridge Fair hosts the Sheep and Wool Festival, or
Right.
Howard Field Days, or those sort of events, which are big for agriculture.
I know that Addison has a lot of horse shows.
Yeah, tractors, yeah.
Tractor pulls. There are a lot of 4-H events that kind of float around the state depending on the year. They go from Addison to Orleans sometimes, and then they go back to Caledonia. And there are, you know, I think that's a question for the fairs when they come in, because they would have a better grasp of what exactly they're doing as far as agritourism. They are considered agritourism, but we don't get any funding from the Department of Tourism to, except for the fact that they have us listed on their website. And we do send a pass to the commissioner so that she can go to all the fairs, and which I might say, after you are all out of the building in May, hopefully. One of the things that the Fairs Association will do is send you all an invitation to visit all the fairs, and you get a free pass. So that we hope that you go to as many as you possibly can. And it doesn't include the rides, sadly. You'll have to.
I'm more concerned about.
I know, I don't like them either, but not even the Ferris wheel. But so we encourage everyone to go and visit as many fairs as you can. And we hope you get out of your own district and visit the ones that are not necessarily yours, because they're all different and they're all very sweet and they're all run by volunteers for the most part. And we encourage you all to visit our fairs.
That's reminding me, having gotten in previous years that invitation and that pass, that I think it also covers some New Hampshire.
It covers all of the New Hampshire fairs also.
Good. I was feeling a little bit that when you asked who it goes to the fairs, I did not raise my hand, even while thinking I do go to the fair in New York State.
You go to Washington County. That is a wonderful fair. Very nice.
Different Washington County.
Well, there is a connection. So the rides company that goes to Washington County goes directly down to Vermont State Fair. So we'll forgive you that one. But the other challenge we always run into, and if Janice Peasley, I don't know if any of you remember Miss Peasley, she was a representative from Guildhall. And they do not, Essex County, Vermont does not have a fair, but their fair is considered Lancaster.
Lancaster fairs.
And she always used to come in here and she'd just ride on me the fact that why can't we give money to Lancaster Fair, because that is Essex County's adopted fair. And the statute says, you know, and I'd have to remind her every year and she'd go, oh, but we never gave them money. But that is a nice little fair too. You can tell I love my fair. They're great. You all need to experience
Freiburg's
them.
a great fair too.
With Bradford?
Freiburg,
Oh,
I'll go there.
okay, we need to focus. I do go to Freiburg Fair too. That's a lot of fun.
Well, thanks for Representative O'Brien.
I mean, Jackie might come in later, but we should probably at least get an introduction to what's going on at Franklin County fairs.
Did you, do you want to save that for when we have more time to?
I can, if, I don't know how late you're going to go. I can speak about that now if you'd like, or.
A couple minutes?
Sure.
Sure.
So Franklin County Fair is one of our two that do not own their property. And they have been leasing land up at the Franklin County Airport for, I believe they said since 1946. That's how long we've been up there. Knowing that the airport owns the land. So last year, some of you who were here, there was a bit of a kerfuffle when the V-Trans came in and asked for an Act 250 exemption for airport development. And it came out that it was for all the airports, but specifically it was for Franklin, because there are two companies apparently that are looking to develop on the land that Franklin County Fair currently resides on, which is about 39 to 42 acres. up on Route 7 in the airport. So their lease is up June 18th this year. They are holding a fair on the property this year. They have been told it will be the last time that they can hold a fair on that property because there is a company or two that want to come in and build. The challenge is, and so last Friday, Representative Emmons asked all of us to come into House institutions because that's where the capital grants is held on the House side. And so Trini Bissard from VTrans, who works for the aviation part of VTrans, was there. I was there. Senator Norris was there, who's the Franklin County senator. Representative LaRoche is from Franklin County, but Senator Norris sits on the Franklin County Fair as of December. Fernand Gagne, who is the president of the Franklin County Fair, was there in person. And Drew Watson, who handles the grants, and I think Abby Willard was there from the agency. The challenge has been over the years, so we have a copy of their lease agreement, and the lease agreement that was signed by Mr. Gagne in 2018 is very clear that it says that the agency has a 30-day option to say you're out. And the other thing is there was something in there that said any buildings or anything that happens on the grounds have to be approved by VTrans, specifically Trini, that they shouldn't be building buildings. And that if they have to leave the property, it has to go back as it was when they first started the lease in 1946. So if any of you have been up there recently, there are buildings. There are buildings on concrete slabs. There is a tractor pull area with probably 3 to 4 feet of gravel and sand and everything they use for tractor pulls. There's a grandstand. There is water and electric that has been buried underneath. And apparently what has been happening is that every time the Franklin County Field Days wanted to build a building, they would go to VTrans, and VTrans would amend their Act 250 permits and say, go ahead and build the building. So we have two folks here that probably were not working in the best interests of either one, because over the years, if you've been up to Franklin County Fair, in fact, they just put up a new post and beam building about 4 years ago on a concrete slab. So they are now, VTrans told them last year that they were going to have to leave at the end of this lease. They allowed them to stay this year. There's several problems going on. There is buried water and electric that, according to the lease, they're going to have to pull up. There are buildings that Franklin County is saying they want to tear down or auction off. The challenge that the House Institutions Committee has is that those were built under the 20-year capital grants contract, and so some of them are not 20 years old yet. So there's a challenge with what's happening with that. And Mr. Gagne has suggested that they are looking at two pieces of property. One of them, he said, was at the end of the runway, which I'm just thinking VTrans will probably have a fit about. I don't know how that's working. And there's another section of land they're looking at somewhere on 78 and 105, I think they said. They have about $260,000 in their checking account. It's not going to be a lot of money to tear down buildings, to dig up stuff, and to buy a piece of land. And they're looking for about 60 acres. So last year when we were having this discussion and when it was discovered that they were going to have to move, there was a suggestion that the legislature would find $100,000. I'm not sure where it was coming from, whether it was VTrans, whether it was general fund, whether it was suggested from the people that were moving in, that was taking over that property, to help them purchase, to put towards whatever they needed to help move. And that money did not materialize. And so they are looking now at having to move for next year. So the challenge is moving. The challenge is finding a place to move to. The challenge is getting everything up and going. And the other challenge for any of you who have ever done an event, most of these folks, the day after that fair ends, they start planning for the next year. if you don't have a place where you're going to go to, not sure how that's going to happen. So the suggestion that you made about if there's not a fair, can we, I mean, that's a perfect fit for Franklin because we're very worried that might happen. And they have to start, there's a challenge too for the three of our fairs. So there's a company called Dreamland Amusements, not to get into the weeds, but it is a problem. It's a little bit of a fallout. Dreamland Amusements, they have a route. It's easier for these guys when they come in and move that they have fairs to go to. And so they go from Franklin to Addison to Caledonia. And the fact now that there might not be a fair might cause a problem for the other two if that amusement ride company doesn't want to come to Vermont. There are not a lot of amusement ride companies that are around here at all. So it's a mess. And we don't quite know what to do about it.
Well, good, thank you for briefing us on that. It's good
Sure.
for us to know about it. I'm sure the conversations will be continuing, the institutions committee. And good, well, thank you for
You're welcome.
coming in this morning. I think we'll take a short break. We've got testimony scheduled at 10, so don't go too far. Next up is the Citizens Advisory Committee on Lake Champlain's future will be testifying.